Good afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's special event. My name is Mamluang Thanisa Chumpon, and I'm truly honored to be the MC for this event. The John F. Kennedy Foundation of Thailand for Thai-American Friendship is sponsoring a special lecture series in honor of His Excellency Dr. Thanat Khawman, the late Chairperson Emeritus of the AIT Board of Trustees and former Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of Thailand. Professor Adrian Ray Chamberlain, former President of the Colorado State University, or CSU, has been invited as the keynote speaker for the special lecture series. In partnership with the John F. Kennedy Foundation of Thailand, AIT is very pleased to host today's Milton E. Bender Lecture, co-organized with Thailand's Chulalongkorn University. This event will be followed by the Thanat Khawman Lecture planned for February 22nd at the Grand Hyatt Erawan Hotel in Bangkok. Our program today also features a special ceremony to inaugurate the AIT Auditorium as the Robert B. Banks Auditorium. American Professor Robert B. Banks served as the president of AIT from January 1977 to July 1982, succeeding Professor Milton E. Bender, Jr., the founding president of AIT. Professor Banks is remembered for the important contributions he made towards the growth and development of AIT during his presidency, and of the bond he shared with President Bender. The afternoon will also include a public discussion moderated by our very own Dr. John D. Nelson, Vice Chairperson of the AIT Board of Trustees and Professor Emeritus of CSU. And we'll conclude with a question and answer session open to the audience. At this time, may I invite His Excellency Dr. Subin Bin Kayan, Chairperson of the AIT Board of Trustees, to deliver his welcome remarks. Please welcome Dr. Subin.
On behalf of the Asian Institute of Technology, AIT, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all our participants. At the outset, I would like to convey our sincere thanks and appreciation to John F. Kennedy Foundation of Thailand for Thai-American Friendship for sponsoring a special lecture series in honor of His Excellency Dr. Thanat Khawman, the late Chairman Emeritus of the AIT Board of Trustees, the former Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister of Thailand. The United States of America, USA, play an instrumental role in the foundation of AIT. Initially as the Seattle Graduate School of Engineering, and later served as a key guiding force for AIT overall development. As one of the regional foremost international institutes of higher learning, the Colorado State University, CSU, and AIT has joined a long-term relationship which began in 1960 when CSU helped create AIT predecessor, the Seattle Graduate School of Engineering. And therefore, we are honored in this occasion to have with us Dr. Adrian Ray Chamberlain, former president of the Colorado State University, as the inaugurant speaker for the Thanat Khawman lecture series. Dr. Chamberlain will be deliver delivering the Milton Bender lecture, and AIT wished to use the same occasion to also honor former AIT President Robert B. Banks, who worked closely with President Bender as the Vice President and Provost, before serving as President of the AIT himself. Prior to the start of the lecture, we will be having an inauguration ceremony of the AIT Auditorium as the Robert B. Banks Auditorium. This auditorium to honor President Bender's legacy. Although they are not able to be with us in person, we are honored that President Banks' wife, Mrs. Gunter Banks, and his son Eric Banks will join us remotely on this special occasion. Our very warm welcome and thanks also to the distinguished panel members, namely Dr. Anat Apapirom and Dr. John Nelson, Vice Chairperson of the AIT Board of Trustees, former AIT President Alistair North, and Dr. Chamberlain, who will also be among the panelists. Our very warm welcome once again to the events. Thank you.
Thank you, His Excellency, for the remarks. Now allow me to invite AIT President Professor Warasak Ganok Nukunchai on the stage to deliver the dedication remarks. Please welcome Professor Warasak.
Professor Robert B. Banks served as the president of AIT from January 1977 to July 1983, succeeding the founding AIT president, Professor Milton E. Bender Jr. Professor Banks spent his youth in Kansas and California. After attending the University of Wichita for 2 years, he served in the U.S. Navy, receiving honorary discharge as lieutenant, junior grade in 1946. He then returned to his academic studies, receiving Bachelor of Science and Master of Science degrees in Civil and Environmental Engineering from Northwestern University and a PhD in Environmental Engineering from University of California, Berkeley. Following postdoctoral research as Fulbright Scholar at Imperial College in London, Professor Banks commenced a 40-year career in academia, holding positions as professor, researcher, and administrator. From the 1950s to the mid-1960s, he was professor of civil engineering at Northwestern University and later at AIT. On his return from Asia, Professor Banks became Dean of College of Engineering at University of Illinois in Chicago. In 1967, he moved to Mexico and became Regional Program Advisor for Science and Technologies for the Ford Foundations. In 1976, Professor Banks accepted the post of Vice President and Provost at AIT, and in 1977, he was appointed President. During his distinguished career, Professor Banks was recognized for his outstanding contributions to education and received numerous honors and awards, including the Commander of the Order of the Academic farms from the government of France, and the most exalted order of the White Elephant from His Majesty the King of Thailand. Professor Banks is remembered for the important contributions he made towards the growth and development of AIT during his presidency. When AIT suffered its first major financial crisis in 1974-1975, AIT founding president, Professor Milton E. Bender Jr., had to return for a year to control the precarious situations. Professor Robert B. Banks was called back to serve as vice president and provost, and subsequently designated as the next president of AIT in 1976. Among Professor Banks' many accomplishments, his major contributions include the expansion of AIT academic programs, the wider involvement of donor countries, the greater increase of faculty strength and student populations, and the improvement of AIT infrastructures. All these set a solid foundation for the next 25 years of continued expansion and financial stability at AIT. Following his retirement in 1983, he remained active in the academic world through consulting, lecturing, and writing. After President Bang left AIT, the last time I heard about him was in 1998, when he published a most interesting applied mathematics book entitled Towering Iceberg, Falling Dominoes, and Other Adventures in Applied Mathematics, and another one titled Slicing Pizza, Raising Turtles, and Further Adventure Mathematics. Then I heard the news that President Bang passed away in 2002. President Bob Bang, as he was called by all the colleagues, aside from being an established academician, was a true gentleman and an accomplished diplomat. Together with Mrs. Kunta Bang, they have represented AIT magnificently and helped build the proud legacy of AIT today. We are grateful to the AIT Board of Trustees for having unanimously agreed to name the main auditorium of AIT as the Robert B. Bang Auditorium in recognition of the valuable contribution made to AIT by our former president, Professor Robert B. Bang. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Warasak. May I now invite both Dr. Subin and Professor Warasak once again at the center of the stage to officially inaugurate the Robert B. Bangs Auditorium. The official commemorative plaque located at the entrance of the auditorium will be unveiled remotely from this stage, but we can witness it here on the screen. Also, the children from the AIT International School who will give a performance later, along with our online audience, will witness this historic event together. So please join me in our countdown to the moment of the official inauguration. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. There we go. Thank you, His Excellency Dr. Subin and Professor Warasak. We will see them shortly. They have a very beautiful performance coming up. Now allow me to present to you a video message of thanks from the Banks family, represented by Mrs. Gunta Banks and her son, Mr. Eric Banks.
Greetings to AIT, to President Warsak and distinguished guests, also to faculty and students who are attending today's events. My name is Eric Banks. I'm son of the late Robert B. Banks.
Sawadee ka, and greetings from Maine. I am Gunta, wife of the late Robert B. Banks. I want to thank everyone involved for the invitation to attend today's ceremony. My family and I are deeply honored for this gesture. We're sorry to miss being at this auspicious ceremony, but Maine is a long distance from Bangkok.
Indeed. As my mom said, we're grateful for the opportunity to share this brief message with you. And we thought we'd just start very quickly with a short walk down memory lane to give you some idea of how Bangkok and AIT came into being for the Banks family. And that really starts back in 1961 when my mom and dad were transferred from Chicago to Bangkok, when my dad was appointed as a professor of engineering at the CETO Graduate School of Engineering. Then some years later, in 1976, we returned as a family when my dad was appointed as provost of AIT. A year later, he was appointed as president, and he held that position until 1983. Obviously, during that period, there were a lot of changes and challenges and successes, and in later years, my dad would often reflect on the fact that that period of time certainly represented the pinnacle of his academic and professional career. So with that brief background, let me now turn to the main theme of our short video message, and that is really to thank everybody for the great honor being bestowed in naming the auditorium after Robert B. Banks. It's certainly very humbling to see his name and legacy thus preserved, and we're sure he would have been very proud of both the day and the event. Let me also extend, on behalf of the entire Banks family, best wishes to the entire AIT community for continued success. We've had the opportunity to get reacquainted with the Institute over the course of the past year through a number of different activities, and it's been absolutely delightful to chart its significant progress and success.
I have so many fond memories of our years spent at AIT, too many to mention here. The photos, Facebook, and correspondence that President Warsak has sent are amazing. So many changes and additions. Would I even recognize a new AIT? Again, thank you, President Warsak, the board, and everyone involved in this honor. We may not be there in person, but definitely in spirit.
Thank you, and enjoy the rest of the day.
Now it is my honor to invite former AIT President, Professor Alistair North, to deliver brief remarks of thanks to the Banks family and his reflection on President Robert B. Banks. Please welcome Professor North.
Thank you. Well, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm privileged to stand here with you this afternoon and say thank you very much to Gunta and Eric Banks for their message, and to record our appreciation of President Robert B. Banks. As President Warsak said, we all call him Bob Banks, and so I shall as well. Now, I only met Bob Banks on a couple of occasions, and so never had the opportunity to know him personally like some of you did. However, when I came and followed him at AIT, I immediately saw his achievements and gained some insights into his character. You see, a new university usually follows an S-shaped growth curve, like many other institutions and companies and businesses. And Bob Banks, in partnership with a very successful Vice President for Development, Rick Palmer, pushed AIT way up that development curve. It was an exciting time. as President Warsak has told you, more and more countries poured resources into AIT. More and more subjects were added to the academic program. More and more faculty came from more and more countries. You know, when I arrived here today, I could see around us the concrete memories of what Bob Banks achieved. For example, north of us, a new building for agriculture and food engineering, funded mainly by Thailand. 2 new buildings for energy technology, one funded by Germany, one funded by France. A large experimental station funded by, well, in those days it was called Republic of China. We now call it Chinese Taipei. And south of us, houses for faculty, staff, and students. And west of us, a very significant building that was much in your news last year, the library building. But I saw not only, when I came, buildings. Bob Banks also passed to me a very effective, very successful team of faculty and staff. And the success of that team, the effectiveness of that team, spoke to me about the wisdom of its leader. You know, all universities experience problems which rise up from day to day, and AIT is no exception. In AIT, though, just sometimes nationality differences, cultural differences, make these issues a little more difficult than they are in a mono-national university. And these are what Bob Banks solved beautifully over his 6 years as president. Let me give you an example of what he was able to do. It starts a long time ago. In 1959, when the Cito Graduate School of Engineering was created, in Europe, most departments in most universities had only one professor. He, it was almost always a man, was head of department, all-powerful, and held the headship until he chose to leave the university. American universities were different. Large departments had several full professors. The headship rotated round the senior faculty. AIT was created on the American model, correctly, we now think. However, as the Institute matured through the 1970s into the 1980s, Bob Banks had a feeling that perhaps some of the division chairmen were getting too like the European professors of 20 years earlier. So he enforced the rotation of the chairmanship. And unfortunately, that gave rise to a problem in one division. The Asian faculty were not happy with the new appointed chairman, who was European and supported by his government's funding agency. And that unhappiness was made worse by some people in the institute and became so serious that 4 faculty members directly opposed, challenged the presidential authority of Bob Banks. And Bob Banks dealt with it very firmly and set the course, the direction, which led to the eventual solution. You see, when I came, I spoke to all faculty members and they told me that Bob Banks was understanding, helpful, and supportive of faculty in almost everything they wanted to do. that was not always possible. And when it was not possible, he was a firm, leading president. Another situation which reflects these things occurred in the final days of Bob Banks's presidency. He had created a new division of energy technology and housed it in a new building funded by Germany. But the division was so successful and grew so quickly that very soon it needed a second building funded by France. It was designed by a well-known Thai architect called Sumet Jamzai. And Sumet had planned that the two buildings would be connected by an elevated, open walkway with a roof, called a passerelle. In the final days of the construction, just as it was being completed, the chairman of the campus planning committee of AIT found that the roof of the passerelle wasn't really high enough above the floor. Ordinary, average-sized persons like myself could walk through it very easily and quite comfortably, but tall persons in the 6 foot to 2 meter category would be uncomfortable. Now, the chairman of this campus planning committee was German, and he did not want an uncomfortable passerelle connected to the German building. But the chairman of energy technology was French, and he wanted to support the architect in everything he did. For some reason which I never understood, the two of them could not resolve their differences. And indeed, in the last days of President Banks's presidency, they were going to their funding agency to get support for each other. For a few days, it looked as if a new Franco-German dispute was breaking out on the AIT campus. Well, of course, it only took a short meeting with Sumet Jamzai and a solution was found which made everybody happy, and we forgot about it. I mention these to show you the sort of thing that Bob Banks faced, overcame, solved in his whole 6 years. What I talked about there were just 2 blips on the smooth running of the Institute, but I think they were quite characteristic. So, as we are here today, as we look at AIT, we appreciate what a debt we owe to Milton Bender and to Bob Banks. We would not be where we are today but for their achievements. And so I think it's very fitting indeed that we can honor them and commend them in this way. Thank you all.
Thank you, Professor North, for the remarks. And now it's time for a performance by the children of the AIT International School. We speak love in many different ways here at AIT, but the feeling is always the same. Love binds us all together in unity amid the diversity. This is the message of the song, Love in Any Language. Please welcome our little performers from the AIT International School on the stage. Thank you all from the AIT International School for this most touching performance. And with this, we will conclude the first part of the Milton E. Bender Lecture Program. Now, ladies and gentlemen, the United States of America played an instrumental role in the foundation of AIT in 1959, initially as the Cito Graduate School of Engineering, and later served as a key guiding force for AIT's overall development as one of the region's foremost international institutes of higher learning. CSU also left an indelible impact on the fortunes of AIT. It was assigned to administer the United States contribution for the establishment and operation of AIT during its formative period from 1958 until 1975. From the very beginning, it was a group of intrepid, bold, and committed academics from CSU who answered the call from the government of the United States to engineer a new kind of postgraduate institute in Thailand. In 1963, CSU sent Professor Milton E. Bender to take the helm of the school. On November 10, 1966, Professor Bender was elected as the first president of AIT. Today, AIT is pleased to welcome Professor Adrian Ray Chamberlain as our honored keynote speaker for the Milton E. Bender Lecture for 2018. Professor Chamberlain was the former president of CSU from 1969 until 1980. Indeed, AIT founding president, Professor Milton E. Bender, was a close colleague of Dr. Chamberlain, as they together charted out the future plan for AIT as the first international postgraduate institute of Asia. Ladies and gentlemen, let's welcome back to AIT Professor Adrian Ray Chamberlain, who will deliver his keynote address titled Cito Graduate School of Engineering and AIT, Beginnings and Visions for the Future.
Thank you very much for that kind invitation. Chairman Dr. Subin, President Vorsak, and all of the other guests who are here, thank you for giving me the honor of speaking to the person you're recognizing, your former president, Milton E. Bender. My notes will start briefly in regard to history way back at the beginning. Then I will try and leap forward and give a particular challenge that, at least in my mind, gives you the opportunity to potentially become the MIT that turned you down way back when, but you become the MIT or the Caltech or the Stanford, whatever peer institution of international status turns you on, you can be equal to that particular group of institutions because you already have survived more than half a century. You are an international institution, not a specific state or particular country institution. So you have some unusual assets to allow you to leap forward to be the leading entity in a modest number of internationally significant research areas, contributing knowledge in a major way to solve some of the, especially Southeast Asia's biggest issues. But before I get deeply into that, I want to make a comment regarding Banks, one of his books. It talks about floating icebergs. Most of you probably do not recall that in the 1970s, the scientific community felt that the globe, the planets, our lifestyle, were in a climate cooling period, and we were concerned about the possibility of freezing because of the re-advance of the ice age of 10, 11,000 years ago. So, among other things, we proposed moving icebergs down the Pacific coast and along the Atlantic coast, source of fresh water and so on. We even proposed carbon black over the Arctic poles in order to assist with warming to overcome the contemplated cooling. Here we are 30, 40 years later, and the whole issue is climate change, climate warming. And I can speak to that as well in more detail in a moment. But the point is that as engineers, we are associated with looking at problems, analyzing problems, and trying to come up with probable solutions, some of which work and some of which may fail. But Bender was in a different world. Now, I knew Professor Bender for roughly 30 years of his life. I knew his wife and daughter reasonably well, but not as well as Milt, because Milt Bender and I spent many, many hours together. Initially, he was one of my professors, and I mean it in the sense that I was the student, he was the lecturer. But his mathematics was not all that great, so on fairly frequent occasions when he was setting out to give us a lecture on structures, I would step to the board and solve his mathematics for him. And of course that got to be a lot of fun for us as well. But over time, why he was in charge of the academic side of civil engineering, and I was in charge of the research side of civil engineering. And we spent many hours together plotting on how are we going to get rid of the dean. Well, we never succeeded, of course, but it was great plotting and gave us time to mutually figure out ways in which we could make the department's program grow. Now, that, of course, in a sense, leads a bit to Maury Albertson. Maury Albertson was my major professor. Now, I didn't see much of him because he was never literally never at home. He was traveling someplace around the world, interacting with anybody he could find a way to talk to, and pretty soon somebody allowed him to become acquainted with the possibility of creating a graduate school of engineering in Southeast Asia under the CETO Alliance. Well, that fell perfectly into Maury's perception of doing good things for the world, and one more contract that he could sell to somebody and get money that would support his colleagues and so on. And that, in effect, led to a set of contracts involving CSU. By that time, I was a vice president of the institution and did sign off on the contracts. It was at Chula, as you know, for the early years. I came over a few times during the very early years. But in terms of in context, I haven't been here in Bangkok in slightly more than 40 years. So you can imagine the context for me and my wife Melanie, who's with me over here, walking on the campus this morning and seeing what all of you have done in the 40 years that I have been completely absent from what you have all done. Now, your prior speaker just commented about a few problems you had along the way. Well, that's no great surprise. We went through some of the same problems on my campus back home. The first 5 years after I was out of office, why, the institution went through 4 presidents in 5 years. And in each case, for good reason whatsoever. So don't be all that concerned about it. Now, let us have a little bit of fun before I go into the next stage of my remarks for you. You know, when I walked up to this podium, just like the other speakers other than this tall guy right down here who spoke last, why, the microphone was right here in front of me. Let me tell you a story about senior President George Bush. I was MC for him in front of 300 media people and several hundred professional transportation people. And my job was to introduce him. The Secret Service told me ahead of time, you are expected to keep the media entertained for 3 to 7 minutes. 3 to 7 minutes went. I kept the media entertained, telling them about the $120 billion piece of legislation that the president was there to sign. Still no president. Still no president. Well, there was a slight difference in the environment in which I was talking and trying to keep them entertained modestly, hoping the president would show up sometime to sign the friggin' bill. And in his case, the podium is about here, but there is a box that slides out underneath it for short people like Prime Minister Thatcher, for whom the box was actually created. Well, at 22 minutes, the president showed, and I could see him walking across from the side door here. So I reached down to try and slide the box back into place and so on, and the dang thing wouldn't go. So while he's walking across, I'm hidden down behind the podium trying to push that box in. He had more fun at my expense over the fact I couldn't even make a podium work, let alone introduce him to sign a $120 billion piece of legislation. But after that, we got along quite well. Well, anyway, one other aspect that most all of you recognize is that Maury already knew, as did Bender, as did many of the rest of us, that one of the key problems in graduate engineering education when we had foreign students come to our campus, and it was true whether it was MIT or Cornell or CSU, that usually about 2/3 of them never went home. about 1/3 would go home and contribute directly to their nation. So Maury was a quick advocate when offered the opportunity to consider creating a graduate school of engineering here on the Chula campus. And that got underway. And I think it's fair to say that a part of what you in turn are wanting to recognize for Milt Bender is his pragmatic problem solving and dogmatic leadership that made things work. And in a financially responsible manner, in an educationally responsible manner, because as has already been alluded to, it is true that about 7 out of 10 new organizations that are created fail within the first 10 years. 7 out of 10 failures in the first 10 years. Bender was, I think in most of our minds, the key who ensured, with all of the political support of the local Thai people and the governments of several organizations, countries, he was the glue that ensured it was not a failure in that 7 to 10 years. And now, at better than 50 years, I think you can say that your prospects are very, very good to have another 50 years, another 100 years, who knows. But the institution will change dramatically, probably within every 10-year cycle that you can imagine. And it's a part of that that I'm going to want to speak to a bit. But when we were starting out with Bender in charge, our conception was largely that the objective was a graduate master's level program for primarily male engineering students from India around to Japan, with mutual support from New Zealand, Australia, and other areas along the way. But the selection of Bangkok was in part based upon geography and an international airport and an accommodation system that Dr. Tanat was central to from literally day one. Now, it was clear in Bender's mind very, very early that his sense of what the objectives ought to be would require a separate campus, not just occupying a little piece of territory on an established institution's campus like Chula Longhorn. So that too raised problems, but he certainly obviously proved up to it and set in motion the politics of change. And over time got the kind of agreement for, what is it, roughly 400 acres of land under long-term leases here, and eventually helped raise some of the money that got it underway. But from Bender's point of view, it was in part pure ego need as president to have a campus independent of which he was in charge of making things happen. Now, new challenges, of course, emerged along the way as it became clear that AID was going to financially fade from the scene, and that was nothing new as far as that was concerned. But like any higher education enterprise, why, it faced, even during his time, crises of money, crises of students, crises of some countries being supportive, other countries wanting to walk away after short-term support. And we can simply be appreciative that Bender stayed long enough to get that first 10 years in effect of the institution's survival in place. So where are we potentially headed from here? And I recognize that you've made tremendous progress in the 40 years that I haven't seen you, but I do think that what you have done is simply set the stage, as I alluded to from the beginning, of becoming the MIT of Southeast Asia. And that takes a lot of money. But now I want to shift to being an advocate for some ideas for achieving that. And I don't expect that you're going to buy onto all of these, but I have seen it work multiple times in other locations, and at least some of the ideas I put in front of you may be acceptable to you, and we'll just see what happens. The first of these is you have to have, and here my sense is that you're very fortunate, you have to have a chairman of your board of trustees who is an honest-to-God leader, not just a manager, a leader. And you also have to have a president who is a leader. Most all the rest of us, whether we're trustees or whether we're faculty or administrative staff, we can be the people who simply do the work that makes the vision and image of our two key leaders a reality. Now, that reality, typically, if the goals are set high enough, costs money. And my advocacy here is going to lead to some things that are a bit more controversial, but which I've seen work effectively. I'll use my example of the creation of this atmospheric science program at Colorado State University. It's now ranked among the top 2 in the world, maybe first, who knows. But the point is that the way we got that started was I had been appointed chairman of a commission on which I had 3 Nobel Prize winners on the commission who gave me advice and so on. And it led to Congress approving through the National Science Foundation the creation of the National Center for Atmospheric Research. And as you know, in terms of Maury Albertson's advocacy at the beginning of the Cito Graduate School of Engineering, the main thesis was hydraulic engineering. All right, hydraulic engineering, irrigation engineering related aspects at CSU dated clear back to the turn of the century, roughly 1900, 1910. And so it seemed reasonable in our mind that, well, we had surface water, we had groundwater, but we didn't have atmospheric water. So what we did was we tied our creation of an atmospheric sciences program to the creation of this national laboratory 60 miles away. And to set that in motion, we set out hiring one of the world's foremost scientists who raised all of his salary and all of his program money from contracts and grants, whether it be the Department of Research, Department of Defense, or anybody else. He actually was a German national who had gotten out of Germany before the war. His specialty was hurricane research. Now, why in time would we start an atmospheric science department with a specialist in hurricane research when we were 1,000 miles from the ocean? Well, the key was because he knew how to develop a program based upon entirely external money, the old external money issue. And while there are many, many other steps along the way, the point that I'm making here is that your next stage of development, I think, calls for your leaders to find 2 to 4 major regional or even larger than regional research areas that society needs to have done, and then set out to find the very, very limited entrepreneurial people who can be hired to come and be leaders. All you need to make this institution an MIT of Southeast Asia is anywhere from 2 to 4 of these major program areas, headed up by clearly not more than 5 world-class scientists, and you will, within a decade, have yourself a reputation that is comparable to any institution on the globe. It is doable. Now that leads to a part of my point for you. You've done a superb job of getting individual countries and enterprises to provide for individual buildings and things of that nature. But it seems to me that, in a sense, much of your day-to-day survival is based upon a modest governmental set of funding and student tuition and scholarships. Now, for the kind of institution that I'm suggesting you can become, financially, I believe you need a 4-legged stool, a 4-legged financial stool. Yes, student fees, yes, whatever government support you can get, but in addition, you need a major contracting grant program of the kind I've just been touching on, and in addition, you need an organized major effort to develop a truly significant endowment program. And just for fun, whether or not your chairman of trustees will talk to me again after this, I'm suggesting that your 5-year goal ought to be about $100 million US. And it is doable. Now, typically when you undertake something of this nature, you again come back to the fact you've been around a little more than 50 years. Now you have enough people out there of the right ages to be able to begin to provide funds back to their institution, AIT, in amounts that they wouldn't have dreamed of when they were students here. But the other half can and ought to come not from alums, but from organizations and well-to-do people. I'll have a little bit of fun by saying Bill and Melinda Gates as one source, because the Bill Gates and Melinda Gates Foundation does support education as well as health. Those are their 2 key interests. But with over 400 billionaires running around, why, there are people who may not be billionaires, and there's some who are billionaires, where your mission, specifically oriented to the major issues of Southeast Asia, can appeal to them as individuals, whether it is in their day-to-day financial philanthropy or whether it is in what they leave in their foundations. The list goes on. But I am a believer that this kind of institution needs, in its overall planning, to have a 4-legged financial stool: government aid, student fees, scholarships, and so on, endowment earning money every month, every day, and a major contracting grant program. If you can achieve that, it needs to be, in part, based upon the idea that none of us know what the world is going to look like 10 years out, 20 years out, 50 years out, but we can have a plan, a vision. Our two leaders, president and chairman, can agree on a vision that is 5 to 10 years out, and they update it every couple years based upon the changes in the geopolitical world of which we are a part. And you're on your way to being an institution that, like Harvard or Oxford, pick the institution you want, can survive for centuries and contribute dramatically for centuries. Built into this, in my mind, are elements of what do we need to try and make sure we get across to students. Engineering students are special in my mind in terms of both opportunity and in terms of what they can and should do for society. Engineers are trained to analyze problems, figure out potential solutions, and then sell those alternative solutions in a manner that no other discipline does. You know, we have pure scientists who create new knowledge, very valuable, but until somebody, such as an engineer, figures out how to apply that new knowledge, all it does is sit in the literature. It is important for engineering students to understand that the most important thing they're going to get out of being students here for their master's and doctoral degree is to learn how to learn all their life. Because whatever they learn here today, it's going to be obsolete within 3 to 5 years. So that's one issue. Another aspect is professional licensure should be encouraged for every practicing engineer. Professional licensure. Another element, for any of the engineering students who have aptitude, 2 or 3 languages has a big payoff in terms of professional advancement and compensation. Further, it is important that engineers get over being so introverted that they decline to participate in their communities. We need engineers to join Rotary clubs, charity clubs, children's organizations, charities, so that they are truly recognized as an active, ongoing part of the community. And then lastly, in this context, I believe that as engineers, we haven't demonstrated, being a few of us at least, being enough extroverted to run for political office. So we end up, if we don't have a reasonable number of our engineers in political office, we're nothing more than the water carriers for the lawyers and accountants who constantly screw up the world. So if any of you, when you have your engineering students, can spot ones who have prospects of being extroverted enough to learn to potentially choose a career that is based upon their engineering, but is oriented to elective or appointive public office, where they can rise to being the Minister of Infrastructure or a dozen other major roles, you will again be contributing a great deal. Now, I understand you have about a 40% female enrollment at the moment. That is something you can take tremendous pride in, tremendous pride. Some of you are undoubtedly aware of what's called the STEM program, initiated by the scientific engineering community, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And it's only been around for roughly a decade or so, but it has shown quite considerable success in getting clear down into the especially junior and senior high schools to try and convince young people, especially young women, to go into engineering and science and mathematics. The fact that you already have a 40% participation at this rate leads me to make a forecast, because it worked for me in veterinary medicine. I think probably before 10 years is out of the 10 highest ranked students at each of your graduating classes, probably 7 of them will be girls. Why? Because young women generally orient to being more committed students than men who seem to want to waste much of their time partying. And so the end result is women get the grades, and then you can have fun with speculating, what's this going to mean on down the road? Well, I'll give you an example. In veterinary medicine and biomedical sciences, in my former institution, 57% of the women, of the enrollment now is women. And if you happen to have animals, especially small animals like cats and dogs and parakeets and so on, the odds are at least 8 out of 10 times the veterinarian who takes care of you will be female. Now, I think the same thing is going to happen to engineering, that we are going to continue to get more and more women to come into the profession, and in part it's because just like the veterinary side of things, the veterinarians used to work solely, and I can have some fun with John Nelson, who's been with AIT for 50, 60 years, sitting over here. The veterinarians used to work on nothing but horses and cows. Now, most of the money is actually with small animals, and women can handle small animals very well. Of course, they handle we males as well, but that's beside the point. So pay attention to pushing programs that are related to computer science, nanotechnology, the list goes on. But even in areas like construction management, where we now have a shortage internationally of more than 250,000 job openings for construction. Sounds like Denver. That has dollars here, graduate officer, national. Job. Society is in as yet handful feet to background. We have 3 academies. We have an Academy of Academy of Academy operate national have relationships is starting 3 parties up. Now electing women one or for foreign members. This year elected 27. Last year is that academy ignite globally and global benefit illustrate out of the class that we 3 from 1 from need to wholly that remember stated national and I kind of program advocate. That is the way issue because we have national a member. Here's one department, one area, academies, go get money offered. Can do leader like President think create the 50th is engineer and ensure. Here's the quote. Path to never invent ways to myriad human societal problems. Solutions themselves adverse. What is through choices, public policy, constantly strive to balance heartening costs become burdensome. Challenge will be costable. Human ingenuity gives us discoveries derived from science, innovations created by. That's your challenge.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chamberlain. And with his insightful keynote speech, we will end the second part of the Milton E. Bender Lecture Program. Now, the final part of today's program is a public discussion. And without further ado, allow me to introduce to you the moderator and the panelists. As a moderator, please welcome Dr. John Nelson, Vice Chairperson of the AIT Board of Trustees and Professor Emeritus of CSU. To join us as the panelists, allow me to invite Dr. Adrian Ray Chamberlain, former president of Colorado State University from 1969 to 1980. Dr. Anat Papirom, director and advisor to the Board of Directors and Bangkok Mass Transit System Public Company Limited. He's also an alumnus of AIT and of CSU. And last but certainly not least, our former president, Professor Alistair North, from 1983 to 1996. And I will now pass the floor to our moderator, Dr. Nelson.
Thank you to everybody. Especially thank you to Dr. Chamberlain. That was a very, very interesting. Personally to me, of course. And, it's my pleasure to be here. I came to Colorado State University. Came to Asian Institute of Technology, 1968, and that's in July 1st. It will be exactly 50 years, half a century. Makes me feel very young. Anyway, at the time I came to AIT. Incidentally, I was hired by Maury Albertson. Many of you people don't know Maury Albertson, but anybody who has ever known him or come in contact knows him as certainly a very special and different type of individual, very visionary person, and a person interested in making the world better. He incidentally was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. Unfortunately, winner, but he was nominated, which is itself an honor. And I came here in 1968, and here was Dr. Bender, the president, and my boss, Dr. Zachimo, who unfortunately could not make it here. He had come in 1960. I didn't realize at the time that we were pioneers. I met 2 two very special friendships when I was faculty member. One was Dr. Subin, the other was Dr. Anat. We were both kids. We were young people. We were enthusiastic about what we were doing. And I think of what Dr. Chamberlain said about have the engineering community have enough interest, energy to go into the public sector, positions in government, elected and appointed. Mr. Subin has held several positions in the government, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of Commerce, and other things, and Dr. Anat was Minister of Agriculture. These people went into government. They also have become very successful individuals. They also were very smart engineers and taught students. And AIT started. What we needed here in Southeast Asia was some people who could develop some programs in irrigation and other areas of engineering. We needed to educate students, graduate students, who would stay in their countries in Asia and contribute to their countries and become peoples. This will have been soon be 60 years old. We have become a mature institution. We have matured. We have come through the trial periods and have succeeded. We're on the way up. Where do we go from here? This was the challenge that Dr. Chamberlain put to us. What do we do in the future, and how do we build AIT bigger and stronger? We need that four-legged stool. What is it that we are going to be building on? Fine to say we need 4 great people to start great programs, but in what? What do we need? Part of AIT's mission in the beginning was to help develop institutions of higher education in their own countries, in Thailand, other countries in Asia. That has been done, and we have very good, successful institutions of higher education throughout Southeast Asia. AIT's mission in that regard has been fulfilled. What do we need to do from this point forward? What should we be training for? What should the new programs be? We need leadership. Of course, we need leadership. That's the most important thing. And we need to develop leadership. And so the question that we have now ahead of us is, where do we go from here? What do we need to do? How are we going to do it? Dr. Chamberlain has pointed us forward. And so, okay, we are going to go forward. How and where? And that is the question I'm going to put to the panel. And we discussed last night. Professor North wasn't at the discussion, so you're kind of at a disadvantage. You get put where we put you. Dr. Anat is going to go first. That wasn't a request, that was an appointment. Dr. North will go second, and Dr. Chamberlain will go last. That was a request. He said, I'll go last and straighten out the other 2 guys after. So I'm going to call upon Dr. Anat. You can. And so, Dr. Anat.
Thank you, Dr. Nelson. Do you want me to talk on the future of AIT, or you want me to talk about Dr. Bender?
Both.
Both. And you give me 10 minutes.
It's up to you as to what you want to talk about.
I look at the audience, they feel a little bit boring a little bit. I do not know how can I make them more exciting. I was blessed to be the last speaker today, but I said, among the four of us, I'm only non-native English speaking among the four. So I have a privilege to say first, so that people can follow my accent after that. I like to talk about Dr. Milton E. Bender first. We used to call him Milton. A lot of people call him Milt. Depends upon how you like to call him. But the fact is, Milton E. Bender is my first boss in my career. He's the first boss in my career. He was the one who hired me as the first direct hire Asian faculty in the Institute of Technology. The reason I'm standing here because of Milton E. Bender. Second thing I remember about Dr. Bender is he also a first golf partner of my, not my career golfer, I'm not that good golfer, but Dr. Bender was a very keen golfer. He kept convincing me all the time, Anat, you have to play golf. When the boss asks you, you have to play golf, I play golf. Not only that, I'm his partner every week in sports club across the Seattle Graduate School of Engineering. That was I was promoted very quick because I was close to Milton E. Bender. Third, Dr. Bender is my big teacher on administration. I was young when I started at AIT. I was about 28 years old, still a young. You were president. Oh, this age as well. He taught me a few tips about administration. I perhaps like to share only a few tips and some of the remarks that he told me. One day he said, I was complaining about somebody in the institute not performing well, why you are still supporting him? Asking Dr. Bender. He said, Anat, we cannot support people halfway. Either you get rid of him, you or support him full way. And Milt of Dr. Bender is very consistent on that. If you support people, he support you all the way through. Which is this principle I have been using to all of my career until even now. Secondly, that he told me that normally a good scholar or excellent scholar, they want to discuss. They don't want to make decisions. I'm sure there are lots of people here are scholars. Are you being like that? Or keep discussing but no decision? Dr. Bender told me, Anat, the reason I'm a good administrator and the faculty love me Because when they cannot make decision, they keep discussing. I make decision for them and they love it. And it's true. Milton or Dr. Bender is very firm decision maker. And every time he make decision, people respect his decision. Whether you hate his decision or whether you like his decision, but people love his decision. Then I was thinking, why in the world that feeling can happen to Dr. Bender? I think because of two reasons. When Dr. Bender make decision, we believe that when Dr. Bender make decision, everybody believe he make decision for the organization, not for himself, for everybody. Secondly, if I'm not mistaken, through my observation, his decision is fair to people concerned. I have to take this one out. Technology really disturb people. Now I'm okay, I'm safe. This art of decision making of Bender has been my motto for a long time, until even now. The other thing that I remember when I see him at Tito Graduate School, I told him, Milt, it's just about time that AIT should have alumni association. I'm sure you know alumni association of AIT. But all over the world, they meet every year at the meeting. But I asked Dr. Bender, but I cannot do it unless Institute, especially you, helping me. He said, what do you want? I said, number one, I want staff at AIT to be a secretary of this association at the beginning. Secondly, I want to have AIT support the annual meeting of governing board of AIT Alumni Association for the first 3 years before we get strong. Because we will have chapter in Taiwan, we'll have a chapter in Philippines, in Vietnam, in Japan, in Malaysia. They're going to meet here once a year in Bangkok. Oh, Mil said, that's all you want? You have idea, but you don't have mechanism. I will give you mechanism. This word mechanism have penetrated in my way of whatever you do, whatever you have to mechanism, make it finish. So these are little tips of Dr. Bender taught me on administration. Another thing I think Dr. Chamberlain have mentioned, I think Professor North have mentioned, that Milton Bender is very good leader. And you agree with that? Why he's a good leader? This morning when I wake up, I think Milton is a very good leader. Everybody say that. Why? To my thinking, Mill always think positive. He's a positive people. Every time he saw me, he would say, "Anat, young boy, we're going to be great. AIT would be a big, not a so bad. Keep saying that all the time, with all positive thinking. A lot of time at that time, quite a few people, he said, that's a dreaming of Bender. But here we are in this campus because of his positive thinking. Secondly, he's a good leader because the way he makes decisions. People love his decision, whether they like his decision or not. As I said, it's for the institute, it's fair for the people. Thirdly, the reason I think he's a good leader, most of the leaders should be a good. Bender is very good salesman. He's not saying a lot, but when he said it, people believe it, including me as well. Last but not least, Bender have a passion of everybody who work under him, no matter what position those people are. Head faculty, vice president, normal faculty, staff member, even coffee server in office. We always have this passion, everybody. Because of this, people have trust on him, willing to contribute for the institute, and believe that under his leadership, we will be okay. Example, when one time the schools, I use the word turmoil, we have to call him back for one year. So that people said, we'll believe that we can survive. He did. But not belong to a new era of the institute. I would say that I wouldn't be today without my first boss, Milton Bender. I'm not going to tell you the story how Milton Bender built AIT. With the characters that I have telling you, all of these factors, I could give you explanation how he did created AIT from C at their school. That's about Milton Bender. You want me to talk on AIT? That's enough for Bender. Okay, huh? AIT was the North. My last boss. AIT. Bender is my first boss. He's my last boss. Before I leave here. Dr. Chamberlain give us the outline, right, on the revenue profile, on how to make it. You have to have 5 people. We make a school great. I don't know how going to fail. I'm going to find 5 great people. I think in this room we have quite a few. give me a little time to tell you a little thought. AIT was established on 5 core values. Number 1, to be center of excellence. And we did. One time, we were center of excellence. People recognize. The word of Dr. Chamberlain, we are MIT of Southeast. At one time, did. Second core values, we said we are international. We are proud of being international. We have more than 20 countries participating. Faculty members, staff members, the students, donors, whatnot, more than 20. We are truly international. Difficult to find any issue in the world that truly international like AIT. Third core values, our revenue profile at that particular time, the word in English, mono revenue. You don't only one revenue is from donation. Don't earn anything. But people give us money to run the institute. That's a nice model. Fourth core values that we have is scholarship. At those days, Dr. Subin, myself, even Dr. Wallace, Professor Wallace, we have scholarship. Every student has scholarship. Not only scholarship, monthly stipend for you to spend on your living. How you find an institute like this? Because we have a lovely donor. Last but not least, we are not excellent, but we relevant to the region. Relevancy is our last core value, fifth. I think the old, not the old, some of them not old, the former alumni or senior alumni still living on these 5 core. To me, I don't think some of core values, we can keep it. Some of core values, I don't think we can. It's up to the people here to decide which core value you want to keep. Which core value you said you have to change. You cannot keep all 5 core values. Example, core values of donation, only revenue of the institute. That one you. The core values of scholarship is nice, but I don't think you. So I keep telling my younger friends as the more junior alumni that forget about the old day. The chapter 1 of AIT has finished. Let's start Thailand of 4.0, you know. Everybody know Thailand 4.0? I think a lot of people are smiling. But we're not Thailand, we're AIT. I would not advocate. I would think that we just about time to start AIT 2.0. because chapter 1 had finished it nicely, successful. And now we have to go for AIT 4. And how AIT 2.0 will be, I'm going to take me another 3 hours. I'm not going to do it. I said you need the people who can help making AIT 2.0. This audience here, the AIT audience. All people in this room have to create. Faculty, the president now, new president, the existing chairman, Professor Subin, would start making IT. You may use the model of, but you may use the model of Professor North. I do not know. But all I can say and finish my talking is we together should build AIT 2.0. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Anand. That's a very interesting presentation. I especially like the things you said about Milt Bender. He was my first boss, my first, he was my first academic boss. Academia. I learned a lot from him as well. Okay, next I think we'll pass the baton to Dr. North, Professor North, and you're on.
Thank you. Yes, Dr. Anat and I have known each other for 34 years, and we've always got on very well. And I would like to emphasize what he says about AIT 2.0. That is absolutely correct and important. Let me tell you why. There are two sides to this issue. The first side is, what does Asia, and particularly this part of Asia, need today and in the years ahead? Because it is no longer irrigation water for impoverished rural farmers. That was why the CITO Graduate School was formed, but it's not the main issue today. So what does the region need? And connected with that is, where is the money coming from? Because it's no longer coming, as Dr. Anat has said, in huge grants from countries like United States, Japan, Germany, and so on. In my view, most of the countries that AIT serves are now middle-income countries, not underdeveloped countries, and not yet at the same GDP level as the so-called developed countries like the United States, Germany, France, Britain. They are caught, as I have said in AIT last May at graduation, they are caught in a middle-income trap, and they need help to get out of it. And the national universities are not oriented towards that. Their programs are traditional university programs, but AIT can orient itself towards lifting, helping to lift countries out of the middle-income trap. Dr. Anat, Dr. Chamberlain has told you some of the things it might do, and you will know how your countries are held back in what subjects, not just engineering, although engineering and certainly computer and information technology, along with others. My own branch, of course, is science, nevertheless. But I also said,
where is the money coming from to do all this? And again, in my personal view, the money has to relate to the jobs that we do. It's got to be, in effect, payment for services rendered. Yes, Dr. Chamberlain mentioned the rich donors, and I like that idea very much indeed. But I come from Scotland, and we've always been poor compared to England. And we got over our poverty by working at what people wanted. And I think AIT resembles that. It's not going to be large sums that we can get, you can get from the middle-income countries. It will be small sums, but from a large number of individual government units, private sector units, not a huge multi-million grant from the central government. And you are going to have to go out and find those needs and find the wherewithal to satisfy them. It won't be easy, and it will be a lot easier and nicer, as Dr. Chamberlain has said, if Bill and Melinda Gates could come along and give us a few million. But you can't rest only on that. I have been retired now for more than 20 years, and I have watched AIT, and I've watched the region, and the region has changed. And forgive me now, the AIT teaching programs have not changed quite so much. And I think you've got a bit of catching up to do. Well, we're all talking about presidents. I sincerely hope that you will help the new president give us AIT 2.0. I hope that you will help him find the tasks, the problems that need solving in Asia's middle-income countries. And I wish you luck with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. North. I don't really think I have anything to add to what you had. Now we will conclude with Dr. Chamberlain, who wrap things.
Well, I think all of the remarks are clearly interesting, certainly for most all of us. I'd like to suggest that there's an issue of opportunity. You're all aware, I think, that the global economy, pretty near every place on the planet, is in a recovery mode after a great deal of uncertainty, and in some cases, such as Greece, have you been near bankruptcy? So when you're in the business of raising significant sums of money, I think probably the best opportunity for a generation may well be the coming 5 years. Because we periodically have economic recessions. We've just pretty well demonstrated globally that we're no longer in an economic recession. We're in overall economic growth mode. So AIT and its leadership need to capitalize on that. They can. Now, some of the issues. I'll give you an example which you people will have to judge whether it fits kind of test. Kind of issue where there has to be big money in it and big engineering innovation skills tied to it. That is the issue of climate change impacts on the influence of sea change on countries that are as low land-based as is much of Southeast Asia. thousands of islands, beaches, what have you. So yes, the Ring of Fire is one of major problems in this area, and the need for better concepts of sustainability, remediation. You have a volcanic eruption, tsunamis triggered. That probably is not as significant as suppose the sea, through climate change, rises as little as 1 meter for half a century. All of Southeast Asia, other than, of course, mountain ranges, are in jeopardy, sustaining the actual lives as well as the quality of life, practically everybody who lives here. Seems to me it's up to you to decide whether this kind of technical area is one that meets your test of significant regional significance. But I try it out as just an example. Now, another area might consider the biomedical engineering area. Nanotechnology in some ways is a part of that, not all by any means. I suspect most of you are aware that most of our antibiotics now and many of our vaccines are literally becoming significantly less effective. And yet, Mother Nature's ability to mutate many, many tens of times faster than our technical ability to create antibiotics, vaccines. Well, engineers in the biomedical engineering sector can have massive impact on humanity if one undertakes trying to help solve some of these issues. Because pandemics are going to happen to us if we don't begin to seriously figure out ways to cope with it. You have already seen some of that on the manner in which Ebola and now flus are transmitted around the globe in a matter of hours because of the huge number of people we have moving around on airplanes. So sit down and generate your own list. You can easily come up with a dozen truly major issues, and then pick out the 2 or 3 that you think have the greatest humanity effect in terms of sustainability, reliability, remediation, that you believe you can sell the geopolitical processes in financing and go after it. And I would wrap up by saying your institution, the AIT, is in a very, very favorable position simply because you are independent of any single government. You're literally the United Nations of engineering innovation. So go for it.
Well, thank you. And I think that pretty much here's one little message I would like to leave all of you with. Look out at the audience here and the people here. You people, it's the beginning of your career. You have just heard words of wisdom. All of us are at the ends of it, still working at it. Here are the 5 things. Energy, different forms of it. Food, world. Not starving. Even people, states, number of medicine. Bill and Melinda Gates, people around the world. Peace. The problems that are raging in the Middle East are unacceptable. We have to be able to achieve peace among the nations. And finally, and importantly, is shelter. People have to have shelter, forms of shelter. A famous architect, Frank Lloyd Wright, has a school in Arizona, and when it's a school of architecture. It's for master's degrees in architecture. And when a student comes to that school, the first thing he or she has to do is they go out in the desert. The school is right by the desert, and they have to build their own shelter. They have to build their own little place in which they're going to live while they're in school. Anyway, I leave you with that. I thank you all for coming. I think this is a very fine tribute to Milt Bender. He was a great man, and one that we will always remember. And together with Milt, I think we can't forget Maury Albertson, because those two really worked together as a team. And then in those early days, one of the things that was helpful to AIT and supportive of Milton Bender was Dr. Chamberlain as the president of Colorado State University, who handled all the contractual obligations and hired the faculty to come from America to come to AIT. Thank you all for coming. And I think that now we have some closing remarks, and I think the panel and us can go sit down and enjoy the rest of the show.
Actually, if you don't mind, we have the Q&A session. We have about 10 minutes left. Would that be okay?
Okay.
So I would like to invite questions from the audience for our moderator and the panelists.
This is not the question, but I would like to respond to Dr. Chamberlain's comments and also Professor North's question. Dr. Chamberlain suggests a program at Colorado State University is an atmospheric science program that makes Colorado State University one of the top of this program. I would like to inform Dr. Chamberlain that at AIT, we had started something like this, what we call since AIT is in the tropical area, this is Southeast Asia, we have plenty of sun. So we have a program, we set up a program we call Solar Energy Solution. We will work on from the beginning as a research to do the research for the solar energy generation. And then we have another program, this is the solar energy storage. So this will be the two programs we start at AIT. We start for some time, almost one and a half years ago. I think this program will be similar with the atmospheric science at CSU. We hoped. So this is what I would like to inform Dr. Chamberlain, that we had followed what you had done at CSU. And another comment of Professor North about the money. You know, as a chairman of the board of trustees of AIT when I got in, AIT, we are almost 60 years old. We are mature. We got the support from many, many people already. I think we should be ourselves. Maybe you don't agree with me, but it's my idea that we should be ourselves. So the money to come to AIT, the one who get the benefit should pay for it. The one who wants help, don't have the money, we can find someone to help those people. So the money should be paid from the one who will get the benefit. Yeah, thank you very much.
Do we have any more questions? Do you have any further comments? Okay, so with that then, may I ask the moderator and the panelists to sit comfortably on the stage for the moment. And it is time to officially close the session. Next, I would like to invite Professor Warasak on the stage to deliver the final remarks and expression of thanks, followed by the presenting of tokens of appreciation to our guests of honor today.
Well, I think it's a historic day for AIT. We are able to hear advices from 4 experts who have been in our business for a long time. And I think we take your advices. And although I'm not sure how much we can do with that, but because this is not the first time we heard about having to have endowment fund, having to change AIT, and so on and so forth. The fact is that AIT is struggling to survive. Therefore, the day-to-day operation of AIT, the needful attentions. If you don't survive, you have no future anyway. So during my time, my mission is to survive, tell you frankly. I think Professor Anat knows very well. I have been consulting him for a while. But today, I think from now on, we are pretty stable. And I think we should look forwards for AIT 2.0. We all know that the model that we are operating today will not last. Because the better we do our job, the sooner we are out of job. If our main target is development, because eventually every country in this region will be quite developed, and therefore, looking for donation from the third country to help is not really relevant. So we have to help ourselves, as the chair said, and therefore we have to change. So this is not the first time I heard that AIT have to change. We heard that 20 years ago, 10 years ago, and now. But I think there's no mechanism that you said to change. If we expect to change, I think we need to have another group of people trying to look for the futures while the operation is going on. It's a kind of transition that the IBM has been doing. When the mainframe is going to be outdated, they have the PC, as another department. And when the PC growing up, the mainframe slowing down, and then suddenly they can have this kind of transitions. So this is something that we may have to do, because you cannot just switch off the existing one and have a new one. See, and things change so fast. I just read a book by Ray Kurzweil. I don't know whether you know them, a great futurist. It's called The Singularity is Near. The change, the disruptive technology today, the growth is exponential, which means we are towards a period where we cannot even predict our futures. You have to go to it, and then the future just comes. And suddenly it changed. So to plan our futures is It's not 20 years. You cannot plan your future for 20 years because by second or third year it's already changed. Okay, so the point is that to plan for AIT 2.0 is very difficult. It's not like 20 years ago when everything is so static that we can extrapolate from what we have into the futures. So this is a kind of great effort, that we have to do. And I'm quite sure that whenever we have the new president, all of us will have to help him. So with this, I would like to end this event by thanking my staff who have organized this very professionally, and also our seniors, especially the President Chamberlain, come all the way from the US. And I would like to inform you that, President Chamberlain is now 90 years old. And when I met him, you may not believe, I met him, I thought he is about 70. And so we need to have a department on this kind of how to maintain health, and invite President Chamberlain to be the first dean. So I would like to thank President Chamberlain, Professor Anand, President Boss, who is my boss, President Alastan North. He is my second boss. Bang is my first boss. and Dr. Nelson's, and everybody who attend this event. And I hope that we are going to have another event in the next 2 days in Bangkok, Elawan Hotel. And this is the Thanat Common lecture. And Dr. Chamberlain will be there as well to tell something about the more wider scope of international cooperations. So again, I thank everybody for kindly attend this event. Thank you.
May I ask Professor Warasak to the center of the stage, and for the tokens of appreciation, I would like to welcome to the center of the stage as well, Dr. Adrian Ray Chamberlain. And next, Dr. John Nelson. Dr. Anat Aphapirom. And Professor Alistair North. And I apologize for this, but I would like to welcome our VIP guests on the stage again for the group photo session.